We are coming to the second last session of the day, sleep disorder in ICD-11, what you need to know. Speaker of this session will be Dr. Ravi Gupta, and chairperson of this first chairperson of this session is Dr. Akhilesh. He is working as an associate professor in PGIMER, Chandigarh. Area of interest of Sir is outpatient services in child and adolescent psychiatry. Sir has 56 publication in his credit, and second chairperson is Dr. S. Shalini Nayak. She is working as an assistant professor in PGIMER, Chandigarh. Her area of interest is brain stimulation, neuroimaging, and EEG in psychiatry, neurobiology of cognition in schizophrenia, addictive disorder. Ma'am has 29 journal articles. She has authored 21 book chapters, edited 3 books, and she is a review editor of schizophrenia research in Frontiers, Brain Stimulation and Brain Imaging, and Asian Journal of Psychiatry. She excelled in her graduation during her graduation and received certificate of honor in anatomy, pharmacological, ENT, and medicine. And she also received international travel grant from ICMR and DST and Pune Psychiatrist Association Awards in since 2019. Now I will hand over to the chairperson to introduce the speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Ajay. Good afternoon, all. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Ravi Gupta, who is head of the department at AIMS Rishikesh. Sir is a certified sleep physician, and he's also running a special service for sleep disorders in the institute. We all know that as pain is the most common symptom which brings a patient to a physician, so similarly, I think sleep is the most common symptom which brings a patient to a psychiatrist. So in the classificatory systems, in the sleep classification, there have been generally trained to do it on the basis of etiology and pathophysiology so that correct treatment can be given. There is also a way to do it on the basis of bodily systems affected which are causing sleep disturbances. So it is very important to know about how the sleep disorders are being classified, because it is going to affect the way we are going to treat our patients. So with this brief introduction, I request Dr. Ravi Gupta to start his presentation. Please, sir.
Sir, you are not audible. Your microphone is in mute mode. Yeah.
I'm sorry. So thank you, Dr. Akhilesh, for the kind words. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Department of Psychiatry, PGIMER Chandigarh, for inviting me to share my thoughts on the sleep-wake disorders in ICD-11. And this is an important area, has already been discussed by the chairperson. So I would like to first disclose that I am the medical advisor to a company that makes the sleep products in India, but there is no conflict of interest related to the presentation that I am going to make. So in next 20 minutes or so, we will discuss about the purpose of the ICD-11 classification. Then we will talk about the changes that have happened in the sleep-wake disorder as a category, and then we will look the individual sleep disorders. Then we will look especially the implications for the psychiatry practice, because that is the most common question that I come across. Can psychiatrists practice sleep medicine? And finally, I'll summarize the talk. So if you look at the WHO website, it clearly mentions that the purpose of the ICD classification is to identify the health trends and statistics worldwide, so that we come to know about the prevalence of the disease and burden of the disease. Then second is to track progress in the global health. So again, the extension of the first point that I have already discussed. Third and more important issue is that with the help of the classification system, and if we have the knowledge regarding the prevalence of each of these disorders, then we can allocate the health resource according to the disorders that are more prevalent and say more life-threatening, maybe having greater economic impact. And for the users, the classification is important for the medical reimbursement. We all know, we all fill the forms of the patients when they come with the medical reimbursement. So they always look for the ICD-10, and from January 1st onwards, they will be asking for ICD-11 classification codes. Then it is important for the national health program managers, again, for the sake of the resource allocation as well as understanding the burden of the disease. And lastly, data collection specialists, again, for the same purpose. So these are the different kind of users which will be using the ICD-10, ICD-11 classification. Now, when it comes to the sleep-wake disorders in ICD-10, one of the important change is that in ICD-10, it was mentioned only as the sleep disorders. And these disorders were present in two different categories. One is in the chapters which was dedicated to the psychiatric disorders. So they have the sleep disorders which were not due to substance or known physiological condition. And in this category, the ICD-10 had insomnia, hypersomnia, sleepwalking, sleep terror, nightmare, and other disorders. Other sleep disorders, they were actually present in the chapters which described or enumerated the neurological conditions, that is the chapter G. And here they have included all these sleep disorders that we see in the International Classification of Sleep Disorders, or now in DSM-5. So bulk of the sleep disorders were present in the neurology section, and the only a select few were present in the psychiatry section. Now, what has happened in ICD-11? First of all, most important thing that instead of sleep disorders, they have named the chapter as sleep-wake disorders. It is really important because, say, whatever disorder a person is having during sleep, it affects not only the quality of or the quantity or the stability of the sleep, but also has some kind of daytime symptoms. So it is really important to understand that the sleep disorders, they are not present only at night, but they have their implications or maybe some symptoms which are present during the wakefulness. And that can interfere either as increased wakefulness or reduced wakefulness. So these kind of problems, they were observed, and that's the reason in DSM-5, ICSD 3 as well as ICD-11, now they all use the sleep-wake disorders instead of the sleep disorder. Second issue is the ICD-10, they classified the sleep disorders into two different sections, one in the neurology, second in the psychiatry. And the basis for the two different classification was the fact that the psychiatry section had disorders which did not have any organic basis. Now we all know that all psychiatric disorders, they are organic, and so are the sleep disorders, even when we talk about insomnia. So the ICD-11, by say clubbing all the sleep disorders in one section, they tried to rule out, to minimize or remove the dichotomy between the organic versus non-organic. Then now in ICD-11, the sleep-wake disorders are present as a separate chapter, chapter 7. Whereas the psychotic disorders, they are present in the chapter 6. And these disorders are not repeated in any of the other sections. So that probably shows that sleep medicine is itself is a science, and it's a separate discipline. Of course, I mean, say the sleep-wake disorders, we can have the feed from the psychiatry, we can have feed from the neurology or pulmonology, endocrinology, general medicine, pediatrics, but these are I mean, as a specialty, it's different from the all other specialties. And lastly, since these disorders are not mentioned into a particular other chapter, a particular specialty chapter, so that's also opened the road for the multi-specialty practice. So now the issue is it's important for the medical legal purpose that anybody who is trained in sleep medicine, they can practice any kind of sleep disorders which are included in this chapter of sleep wake disorders. So that could be a medical legal purpose of having this. Now coming to individual disorders. If we look on the right side of the slide, this mentions the insomnia which was present in the psychiatry, the F51 to 51.09, and the insomnia present in the neurology section, the G47 to 0.00 to G47.09. And then they have the insomnia in the chapters of the addictive disorders in the psychiatry itself. So F10 10.182 to 19.182 to 982. Now, years of research has shown that the insomnia is no more just a symptom of any other disorder. I mean, this can be seen in anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, can be seen in bipolar disorder, can be seen in depression, can be seen in substance use during withdrawal or during intoxication. But if you do not treat insomnia, that insomnia in long term gets dissociated from the original illness and it starts running its own course. So, this was realized in 2005, and in 2005 there was a meeting in the NIH, US, and they came with a proposal that insomnia should not be considered either primary or secondary. Moreover, say in the earlier classification ICD-10, the primary insomnia was further classified into 4 subtypes: adjustment, paradoxical, psychophysiological, and acute. Now, we have enough scientific data to suggest that a person who is suffering from insomnia, he has the say the clinical symptoms which are from, which are falling into more than one of these categories. So finally, it was decided that insomnia should be considered as only insomnia. Maybe we can differentiate it on the basis of the chronicity or the say longitudinal course. So now the ICD-10 clearly mentions that on the DSM-5 as well, that if the insomnia is more than 3 months, then it's chronic insomnia or insomnia disorder. Otherwise, it's short-term insomnia. Now, in addition to that, what has been included in ICD-10 is the important part that the insomnia, people who are suffering from insomnia, they also have daytime symptoms like fatigue, sadness of mood, poor attention, lethargy, headache, poor concentration. So in absence of these symptoms, you cannot diagnose actually insomnia. And if a person comes to you with only the nighttime complaints and the complaints are of significant clinical value, but you do not find the daytime symptoms, then probably you can consider that person for the non-pharmacological therapy and you can diagnose insomnia disorder unspecified. So that's a category that they have mentioned. So the change was done because there was overlap across the primary insomnia categories. And again, we have talked about the longitudinal evolution that as the insomnia symptoms remain there untreated, it starts running its own course. Then important part is the shared neurobiology. I mean, we talk about the insomnia and psychiatric disorders and many other disorders. And now it has been, there have been a great number of papers which are available and which looks at the functional neuroimaging of the insomnia patients. And they clearly mention that the areas which are affected in the insomnia, they grossly overlap with that of anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, and other areas. And we all know that the people who are suffering from stress, they are not able to sleep well. And the vice versa is as true as well. So again, it's a kind of chicken and egg kind of paradox, what comes first, but the issue is they both coexist. So we know that the shared neurobiology is there. And important part is based upon the individual primary insomnias, a number of interventions were developed like sleep restriction therapy, relaxation therapy, or stimulus control therapy. But years of research have found that all these therapies, they are not effective when they are given, say individually. Individually means only the single therapy is given based on the diagnosis of a, say, stimulus control therapy for psychophysiological insomnia. Say, For paradoxical insomnia, paradoxical intention therapy. So these therapies, they have not been found useful in singular. And what has been found that when we look at the CBTI, we have to have a multi-model approach. And then again shows that all these primary insomnias, they do not occur in isolation, but they occur jointly. So that is again reason the 4 different types of primary insomnias have been removed. And lastly, more important part is as soon as we mention that insomnia is secondary to depression, secondary to alcohol withdrawal, and the moment we say secondary, we focus mainly on the other illness, but one illness, and the insomnia remains untreated, and then it's free to run its own course. So that interferes with the treatment, the holistic treatment of the patient. And that is the reason the concept of primary versus secondary has been removed, and this is based on the scientific data. Now, coming to the hypersomnia in ICD-10, the hypersomnia was classified mainly in 5 major categories, and then one is the category of NOS. Now, if we look at the ICD-11, it includes the narcolepsy in the conditions which are characterized by hypersomnia, which was not included in the ICD-10, and the narcolepsy was given a separate code. So this is something which has been done in ICD-11, that narcolepsy has been included in the hypersomnolence disorder. And this is just to emphasize the fact that the patient with the narcolepsy, they also have sleep attacks, which are usually, say, often then they are undesired, and they occur during the night despite the adequate time spent in the nighttime sleep. Now, coming to the recurrent hypersomnia, earlier we have 2 different diagnoses regarding the recurrent hypersomnia category. One was the Kleine-Levin syndrome, and second was the recurrent hypersomnia associated with menstruation. Now, this has been, the research which has been conducted since then showed that the scientific evidence for the hypersomnia associated with the menstrual cycle is not robust. And the we do not have any specific treatment for this. So that is the reason this has been removed, and only the Kleine-Levin syndrome has been included here in the ICD-11. Now, again, for the idiopathic hypersomnia, earlier it was classified into the long sleep time and without long sleep time. Again, we did not find any evidence for the same, because the idiopathic hypersomnia without long sleep time often overlaps with that of narcolepsy. So that was the reason that it has been removed, and now we talk about only the idiopathic hypersomnia. And in addition, one important category that has been included is the insufficient sleep syndrome. I mean, we are getting these patients every day, and especially the young people, the adolescents, they are suffering from insufficient sleep syndrome. And say the papers, they show that nearly 20% of the adolescents and the adults, they are suffering from insufficient sleep syndrome. And the consequences of insufficient sleep syndrome are grave. Look at the emotional consequences. These people, they become irritable, and then they are not able to focus their cognitive abilities to the whatever work they are doing. They make multiple mistakes, and they have the behavioral issues, especially when it comes to the mood as well as the psychomotor activity. So they often feel fatigued. And lastly, we know that the cardiometabolic adverse effects like metabolic syndrome, coronary artery disease, stroke, diabetes is quite common in this population. And one of the paper tried to look at the economic costs of the insufficient sleep syndrome, and they found that it costs nearly $411 billion in US. So for these reasons, the insufficient sleep syndrome was included in the ICD-10 in the category of the hypersomnia. And this is an important category, and these patients, they come to us, and they are very often they are mistaken for other hypersomnias. Now, when it comes to the sleep-related breathing disorders in ICD-10, if you look on the right side, they mentioned sleep apnea. they did not consider it the breathing disorders. So it appeared that beyond apnea, there is nothing which is present. But now in ICD-11, we have sleep-related breathing disorders, which include not only the apnea, but also the disorders which are related to the hypoventilation and hypoxemia. Again, if we look at the central sleep apnea, the ICD-11 talks about the number of different categories that can happen with the central sleep apnea. So it gives you a detailed system to identify and treat the more importantly, because the treatment for all these different kind of central sleep apneas, it is different. So it helps you to actually individualize the therapy, target the therapy. Then coming to the sleep-related hypoventilation and hypoxemia, it has included certain new categories. The obesity hypoventilation syndrome, which was not present in the ICD-10 here, which was actually mentioned in the endocrine section, has been brought to the category of sleep-related breathing disorders, so as to show that all these disorders, they have the shared pathophysiology and probably shared in part the treatment as well. So these are the disorders which are included here in as the new. Now, what new disorders which are really important, which have been added in ICD-11 are the treatment emergent OSA. Now, earlier, the treatment emergent OSA was not mentioned in the ICD-10, and say the research was mentioning it as the complex sleep apnea. Now, definition for the complex sleep apnea varied across the literature because we did not have a singular definition by which we can diagnose the patient. So now we all know that the complex sleep apnea, again term, it is a bit complicated because it is this sleep apnea is not complex, but it emerges because of the CPAP So it has been renamed as, from the literature in ICD-11, it has been renamed as treatment emergent OSA, so as to clarify the pathophysiology. Now, many of the patients earlier, they had substance-induced central sleep apnea. I mean, we all are getting the patients, especially with the opioid use. And these patients, they complain of poor sleep quality because the opioids, they increase the chances of having central sleep apnea, and which was not categorized earlier. Now this has been included in the central sleep apnea category. Now, earlier, the Shin-Stokes breathing was not mentioned in ICD-10, and now it has been mentioned that the central sleep apnea can be present with or without Shin-Stokes breathing. And the treatment for both could be different, so is the pathophysiology. Earlier, the sleep-related hypoxemia, which is not uncommon in patients who are having obstructive pulmonary disease or restrictive pulmonary disease, that was actually clubbed with the hypoventilation syndrome. Now, if we look at the specifically, if we look at the diagnosis of the hypoventilation, it rests on the presence of hypercapnia, not the hypoxemia. So these patients were actually going untreated. Now, the patients who are suffering from COPD or say interstitial lung disease or maybe sarcoidosis, who are not having hypoventilation but only having the hypoxemia, they can be diagnosed and can be treated. So it's a major say step to help those patients so as to prevent further complications like say pulmonary arterial hypertension. Now, one of the major problem is still that we are having the present classification ICD-11 that in the category of the OSA, we know that there are different phenotypes, and based on these phenotypes, the treatment approaches are individualized. Now, this has not been included. Still, the ICD-11 talks about a single diagnosis of the OSA. So I think this is one of the major problem, and that should be addressed in future. Coming to the circadian rhythm sleep disorders in the previous classification systems, as you can see on the top right side of the slide, top side, The most of the categories, they are similar in the ICD-10 as well as ICD-11. The only thing is that here again, in addition to sleep, the wake word has been included just to show that the disorders, they have the residual symptoms during the wakefulness as well. And secondly, the term free running was changed to non-24 hours rhythm because free running cycle was little a bit confusing, whether it's a long free running or short free running. So now this has been changed to non-24 hours rhythm just to show that the cycle is can be either shorter or longer than the 24 hours, but it is not the 24-hour cycle. Coming to the sections of parasomnia, a number of changes have been made. On the right side, you can see that parasomnia section included unspecified parasomnias, confusion arousal, REM sleep deprivation disorder, recurrent isolated sleep paralysis, and not classified elsewhere. That means the parasomnias which have been included in the psychiatry section, that is the nightmares, sleep terror, sleepwalking. So the issue is, if we look at the pathophysiology of the parasomnia, I mean, it is similar. And the present understanding shows that the non-REM parasomnias, they are actually the disorders of arousal. They occur because of the microarousals from the non-REM sleep. So they have been clubbed together in one section just to show that these disorders, they have shared pathophysiology and shared treatment as well. Now, one new disorder which has been added here is the sleep-related eating disorder, which is an extension of the sleepwalking, but which was not specified earlier. But still, some of the disorders like sleep-related sexual activity or sexual disorder, it has not been included, and maybe in the future, because of this medical legal importance, it will be included in the ICD-11 in this section of parasomnias. Now, coming to the parasomnias, which are predominantly seen during REM, so they all have been clubbed together in a section known as the parasomnias related to the REM sleep to show that they have their origin in, during a particular stage of the sleep, and their treatment can also be, the principle of their treatment can also be overlapping. Now, some of the parasomnias which has been found to be of clinical relevance, like exploding head syndrome, sleep-related hallucinations, they were not included. They were not known earlier, and these are the two new parasomnias that have been included here. And we are still trying to find out the literature and trying to make it more robust regarding the management part, especially. Now, the parasomnias were also included in the substance use category. So they have also been brought to the parasomnia category so as to bring a uniformity. Because these parasomnias, whatever their reason, etiological factor could be, the underlying pathophysiology remains the same. So that's a good move that we have seen in the parasomnia section. About the changes in the parasomnia, again, the dichotomy of the organic versus non-organic has been removed, and certain parasomnias have been renamed, and the certain parasomnias have been added in the parasomnia section. When it comes to the sleep-related movement disorder, earlier this restless leg syndrome was considered a separate disorder, and the number of these movement disorders were also less. Now, in this classification has introduced a number of new categories in this section of the sleep-related movement disorder. So it has included the sleep-related rhythmic movement disorder. We all get the children who are suffering from intellectual disability or maybe autistic spectrum disorder. And when we know that these children, they are, some of these children are involved in the head banging or making a rhythmic body rocking movement when they are going to sleep. And at times, this is so difficult for the patient himself as well as the family that their sleep is disrupted. So this is a new category which has been included. Similarly, the proprio spinal myoclonus is a new category which has been included because this interferes the people, although the sufferers, relatively rare disorder, but the people who are suffering from peripheral spinal myoclonus, their sleep gets disrupted to a large extent. And so it is important to properly diagnose and treat this condition. Then sleep-related movement disorder due to medical condition, we all know that certain antidepressants and antipsychotics, they can give rise to restless leg syndrome. Similarly, the iron deficiency anemia, CKD, they can also give rise to the restless legs syndrome. Similarly, Parkinson's disease is associated with restless leg syndrome. So earlier we did not have a diagnosis for this. Now, having this restless leg syndrome in the SRMD category, now we can make a diagnosis and we can offer the treatment to the patient. Similarly, RLS and say other sleep-related movement disorders, they are not uncommon in presence of medication use or the substance use, especially the opioids and the alcohol. We know that. So having these conditions, this particular entity, the SRMD due to medication and substance, now give us a chance to diagnose this disorders separately and to offer the treatment to the patient in the benefit of the patient. Now, one of the major issues that I often come across, especially by my residents, so one of the issues that they often raise, can we practice the disorders which are not listed under psychiatry, especially say if we talk about the mental and behavioral disorders, as it was considered in ICD-10 and ICD-11. Now, say I tried to search the literature, and what I came to know that listing of the disorder is just for the sake of having ICD code, and the reason for having the ICD code, we all know, we have discussed in the first slide. Whether you can practice the disorder which are not mentioned here in the category, I mean, category of your specialty is the open debate. But say most of the papers say that it basically depends upon the curriculum. If you have been trained in your curriculum regarding any of the disorders which are also included in the other categories, no matter where they are mentioned in ICD-10, 11, DSM-5, or whatever the classification system is, you can very well practice them and you can treat the patient. So having a separate section does not mean that we cannot now treat sleep disorders. Rather, it's a welcoming move and it opens the door for all of us to treat sleep disorders. Now, again, I tried to look at the medical legal implications of treating the sleep disorders by a psychiatrist, and say I came to this paper, and this shows that when it comes to the medical negligence in India, the negligence is decided upon three major parts, which are the physician responsibility. First is intent. What was your intention when you were treating the patient, whether the intention was to harm or not? And of course, we know that none of us want to harm the patient. Second is necessary qualification, whether you are qualified to do that particular set of skills or the procedure. So of course, that is decided by the curriculum, not by the ICD. Thirdly, whether you have taken the informed consent in proper manner or not. So many a times it is implied consent, and maybe we all take the informed consent nowadays. It may not be written, but as a code again goes with the implied consent, that when a person has come to you, then it is implied that he wants to take the treatment. Now, when you are doing a particular procedure, which is say not listed in your category of ICD-10 classification, so this paper says that a general body of experts should concur that your action was, well informed, and whatever you decided was in the benefit of the patients, and it is to the best it is according to the available scientific literature. So a general body of experts should concur that whatever you did in the benefit of the patient. Then secondly, there should be evidence that standards of the care were followed while you were offering the treatment to the patient. And thirdly, it meets the common sense test. That means, say, of course, common sense says that we cannot perform neurosurgery or any other kind of major surgery. So that's a kind of common sense test, but that does not, I mean, if we are treating sleep disorders or maybe headaches, I mean, irrespective of the fact that they are mentioned anywhere else, or maybe you are treating hypertension, irrespective of the fact that whether it has been included in the mental and behavioral disorder section of ICD-11 or not, it makes a common sense that you are an MBBS doctor and you can treat primary hypertension at least. So again, from the medical legal point of view, having a separate chapter removing these categories from the psychiatry section does not mean that we cannot treat these disorders. So in summary, the ICD-10 is a welcoming move. First, it discards the artificial dichotomy between the organic and non-organic. And I think it is important for all of us to understand and to not to use organic word. So, I mean, as often as we use, so it's better that we do not use that word. No, the ICD-11 recognizes sleep medicine. It's a separate science, separate discipline, and which opens the door for the multi-specialty approach. And it also has identified certain new conditions which require the clinical attention for the in the benefit of the patient. So this is all from my side. And once again, I thank all the organizers for having me here, and to all the participants for patiently listening me. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ravi. It was a very insightful talk, sir. I enjoyed listening to you. As this morning, Dr. Basu sir has said, you know, how the sleep disorders have been moved from mental, behavioral, and neurodevelopmental disorders to a separate chapter. You have added to it saying, you know, it's not that it is moved out of a psychiatrist purview. It's in fact welcomed a lot of multidisciplinary and multi-speciality clinicians and researchers to come and study it extensively and explore more evidence-based approaches. Yeah, sleep, be it excess or deficit, we have seen it is something that we find across all the psychiatric disorders. As you said, sir, it explains a lot of shared neurobiological underpinnings. Thank you so much, sir. In the interest of time, with your due permission, may I ask participants to bring in their queries? I'm sure this topic is something which would generate a lot of doubts and enthusiasm. So I would request them to take all those queries into the breakout room session.
Sure.
Yes, thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Oh, Dr. Ajay.
Dr. Ajay, you may kindly start the session. Dr. Rao is already here.
So